to order. We're going to have a pledge of allegiance and then a prayer. Please stand. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Gracious Father in heaven, we just thank you for this day. Father, another day that we could worship you. And I thank you for the creation that you have for us. Help us, Lord, to take care of it. Lord, I pray that you would just be in this meeting tonight, that you would give us all wisdom in our words, our comments. Say here, may it be glorifying to you. Father, if we know that one day I'll stand before you, we will all stand before you. And Lord, help us to praise and worship you while we're on this earth. Thank you again for all that you do and for your Son that came and gave us hope of another day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
You're fine.
All right. Before we approve the minutes of the previous meeting, I would like to welcome our newest board member, Logan Davidson, and very happy to have him fill that vacancy. And welcome. And do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah. So I feel I definitely thank you for the opportunity, but I had a message that I have today that I wanted to share. I cannot, in good conscience, belong to an organization that shows such ruthless disregard for the twin principles of true conservatism: fiscal responsibility and small government. Additionally, the right to one's property, the sacred right to do with it as one pleases, so long as it doesn't encroach upon a neighbor, is a bedrock of our nation. I originally contemplated joining the commission under the misguided belief that I could fight from within to resist the kind of guerrilla politics we saw on full display today, and to help stymie government overreach like the latest attempted ordinance. But I found it laughable that you were perfectly fine handing out heavy-handed fines against poor people, royal folks for things like old cars, yet shrugged off pollution of residential property in the name of knowing the risk of building in an agricultural zone. I found it absurd that you spent time worrying about regulating adult entertainment industry that doesn't even exist here and won't, given the realities of a small rural county and the free market, the internet. I found it infuriating that you sought to regulate local businesses and the local food movement when many of my friends are Amish. Many of my friends are Amish. And I myself own a local food business. This isn't conservatism, it's government overreach. And I'm also concerned about solar farms. But I'm also concerned that if I have my own property, I should be able to do with it what I please. In my opinion, the Planning Commission should be disbanded altogether. We need to return to common sense government where people are trusted to manage their own property and lives without unnecessary interference. Hopefully we can achieve that through the democratic process. So that is my statement.
So could you repeat the first line of your original statement? I'm a little confused.
First line is that I swore in 5 minutes ago before this meeting started, and I'm officially resigning now.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. So, thank you. All right. Everyone, I assume, has had time to review the meeting minutes of the last meeting. which was January 7th, and the special meeting for January 23rd. They're all in front of you. If you'd like to take a couple minutes to review those, and then I'll ask for a motion to approve.
He didn't have. I'm sorry. That's okay. I could have said my number.
All's well.
All right, if there are no corrections to the minutes, could I have a motion to approve the January 7th and the January 23rd minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Danielle, seconded by Kevin. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to jump back into the document with all the public comment, good, bad, or otherwise. I think it's been a learning experience for all of us. And I think we're ready to look at things maybe in a little bit different manner. Things like this tend to do that. But we do have a job to do. We do have some very important aspects of this document that need to be addressed. And one of the most important ones, and which should be a fairly straightforward and should be a very valuable document as far as how it affects the people of Washington County, is the subdivision ordinance, because many people on both sides of this issue have stated repeatedly that they certainly didn't see much problem at all with this document the way it's written now. And we have made some minor changes, and at this time I'll call Connor Barnett forward to go over the finer points of the document. And once again, I want to reiterate, contrary to what some think, this is a far cry from government overreach. This is simply to protect everyone from, in this case, developers. In the past, developers have taken advantage of a lot of people in this county, and I've seen it over the past 40 years. And we do need some rules regarding this, and I think this is a really good start. I want to thank you, Connor, for coming in this evening.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's good to see you guys all again. As Todd said, we've been working on this for quite some time now on some of these amendments and the ordinance changes. So after discussion and some of the community comment, we've decided to pull the subdivision control from the rest of the zoning document. I believe all of you guys have received a copy of that, and hopefully have got a chance to review it. I know we've talked about this a lot over the last handful of months, and the public's obviously got a chance to review the subdivision control side of things. I think it'd be a good idea to maybe do a brief overview, answer some questions tonight, and then I think it would be wise to publish this for the public's review and comment and question. Possibly assign someone to answer some questions that surround this. I think a lot of them have already been answered after the last review, but just kind of want to see what you guys want to do moving forward, what the process needs to be. We can answer any questions, hit on any notes, anything you guys have tonight. Just give me some guidance on how we want to handle it, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm fine with what Connor suggested. Is just might go around the room here, and you know, if this takes a month or more, then so be it. We want to make sure that everyone is heard. Not everyone will get what they want, but you know, there's no way to please everyone. But I think, generally speaking, that we can come up with a document for the subdivision that will be very fair and falls in line with what many of the other counties have had for many, many years. Anybody have any comments about how we need to proceed when we go through it? I do agree that we need to post it on our county website, give everyone an opportunity to look at it, take questions, and whatever it takes to make sure everyone's heard.
Yeah, Todd, we can just give a brief overview. So for anyone sitting in the public.
And before we start, not to interrupt you, Connor.
Yeah.
In these folders in front of Todd, there are copies for the Planning Commission that I've printed out. I'll pass them out before we get started.
The revised, you mean?
Yeah. Thank you, Connor. This last draft.
Oh, okay.
It's not a document, it's just a draft. Put these together so everybody is going to review it and have something to look at on the commission.
Okay.
Yeah, and while Emily's passing that out, I think we
And
can just
there's
give
numbers
a
at the top.
brief overview of
Thank you.
You're welcome.
what a subdivision control ordinance is. So I think when some people hear subdivision, they're thinking mass subdivisions, 20, 30 lots. This would apply to any subdivision of property in the county. You know, if that's splitting an acre out of a 5-acre farm, it would still fall under this subdivision control ordinance. And it would be broken down into 3 levels. So administrative review, which would just be reviewed by whoever the Plan Commission designates that to be, whether it be the building commissioner or the surveyor. That would be up to 5 splits from a piece of property, no less than whatever we decide. I know there's been some conversation there, whether that's 1 acre or 2 acre minimum, and then a frontage requirement that we need to kind of hash out tonight on how you guys want to move forward on that. But up to 5 parcels out of the parent parcel being subdivided. If it's over 10 acres, it would be exempt from that, so it would not account against your 5 parcel split. Those are going to be reviewed by that representative appointed by the Plan Commission. So again, whether that's Travis or Emily, If a survey is completed, the split ground, it would come before their office. They would review it, make sure that it meets the plating standards that you guys are adopting per this ordinance, before it's recorded downstairs and that transfer of property can take place. And then minor subdivision would be between 5 and 8 splits from a tract. Those can include access easements. And there's also some regulation on when those are and are not allowed. And then minor subdivision would be what you're thinking of as far as a major development. You know, those multiple lot, 10, 12, 20 lot subdivisions with streets and sewage extension potentially, where you're looking at some bigger infrastructure. So this ordinance is 12 pages, 14 total, 12 that kind of break down what the requirements are for the approval of those subdivisions, and the last 2 pages are your notations that'll be on the plat for adoption and signature blocks. So I think it's important to discuss some of the issues and why I think it was important that we've had these discussions and brought this to the table for adoption. In the past, there has been, until recently, no subdivision control, and then you guys have adopted some standards, I believe, over the last couple of years. But what we're seeing a lot of in Washington County is 6, 7, 8 parcels split off of one access easement, which is just a recipe for disaster when you've got multiple homes being accessed by one easement. Sometimes that works when it's all family. That's what we hear a lot of. But over the years, that becomes strangers. Somebody moves away, somebody gets divorced, somebody passes away, whatever the case may be, and next thing you know, you've got 6, 7, 8 strangers living on a shared driveway that nobody wants to maintain. There's no maintenance agreement in place, and it just causes a lot of headache and issues for the property owners as well as the municipality on getting constant requests to maintain their road, which is just a private access easement. Another issue we see is multiple homes being built on a piece of property rather than being subdivided and each home being on its own parcel. There'll be 1, 2, 3 homes on a piece of property, and that's great until somebody forecloses on their mortgage or forecloses on their home and is tied to that mortgage. So again, I know we're putting some regulation in place. Obviously, some people are very unhappy with that, but this is to protect the public and make sure that some of these boxes are getting checked before issues like that happen. Daniel Bland's here. I think he's on the agenda to speak as well. He deals with it, and the surveyors in this community deal with it more than anybody, but they see some of the issues that arise from not having that subdivision control ordinance in place in this county all of the time. When you have a piece of property surveyed and split so you can build a home on it, it is surveyed and the survey is required. Well, then you actually know where your property lines are. I've heard multiple horror stories in this county of homes being built over a property line or completely on someone else's property because they may think they know where that property line is via possession, but nobody's ever had that surveyed, and turns out it was 45 feet west of where they thought it was. So those are some of the issues that we're trying to eliminate with this ordinance. Again, rather than go through it paragraph by paragraph tonight, I think it would be a good idea to spend a month, everybody really going through it. You guys all have my contact information. Ask me any questions on what we've prepared, answer any questions the public has, and then maybe even have another discussion next month before setting it for public hearing. So with that, I'll answer any questions you guys have. If we want to dive into a certain section or chapter, I'm more than happy to do so. You just let me know how we want to proceed.
The only question I have is on the 13-5 on page 6, where basically that first paragraph, the last half of it was deleted.
Yeah, so I carried that over from minor when I was preparing this. That was a mistake on my end, Todd. So this, a major subdivision would include public utilities as well as the extension of public roads. That's one of the things that makes it a major subdivision.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So that was just an oopsie on your part, right?
It sure was, yes, sir.
Okay.
I apologize.
No, you're-
Exempt subdivisions would again just go through whoever you guys designate that to be. So with building commissioner, county surveyor, that would be the administrative subdivision. Minor subdivisions would go before a plat committee, which is 3 to 5 people that you guys would appoint. Those do not require a public hearing per state statute. So everything in the subdivision control ordinance goes back to reference Indiana Code 36-7-4. It's the 700 series, is what kind of outlines the regulations for subdivision control ordinances and gives the local municipality the power to adopt these. And then major subdivisions would actually come before the Plan Commission for a public hearing.
So I have a question. So you said the minor subdivision would need to go through a committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Plat committee.
And that's appointed by the Plan Commission. Typically, what you see in municipalities is that the county surveyor will serve on that, the Plan Commissioner or Building Commissioner will serve as secretary, and then the highway superintendent would also serve on that. Doesn't have to be, that's just typically what you see.
Okay, so, okay.
Yeah, we had discussed that a couple times and thought that made sense. 3 people, 3 key people, the building commissioner, the surveyor, and the county highway superintendent, since in many cases, subdivisions naturally coming off of a county road, there's lots of traffic and safety issues, and we felt it important, as is usually commonplace in most counties in this state, where the plat committee has included on that board the highway superintendent.
I'm going to ask something. Well, me and Connor probably more times than he would like to admit, because I have read this document a lot in the past months. And I have questions about it. I've asked Connor every question that I could think of on it. We've talked about it. There's some changes that I would like to see made to the document, Connor, and we've talked about that as well. I'm going to wait until we review it for a month before I bring it forward so everybody can look at it. I don't want to just throw it out there without everybody looking at it first. But I would really, really hope that everybody on this board will read this document. I hope the public reads this document. This document would be so good for our county. Not just from my office standpoint, but from a neighbor standpoint. There's a joke that you hear in our county, it's neighbors, or fences make good neighbors. And the fence doesn't make a good neighbor if you don't know where your property line is. Because you spend a lot of money on that fence, and you get it put up, and then you might get a survey, or your neighbor might get a survey, and that fence might cross the line. It might not, it might be totally on your neighbor. And I want people to know what they own, because I don't want anyone to think that anyone's trying to take away what they own. And if we could start by surveying your property, if you're going to sell off part of it, it would give a lot of people peace of mind. And I just want people to read this document, and I want you to put effort into this, because it means a lot to me that we get somewhere with this document.
What you're saying is by not having any rules causes you a lot of grief.
Not having, I don't want to say our county doesn't have any rules. We have some rules on the books. They're just not working for times that are happening now. And if we can help the public out by updating and making it better, I don't know why we wouldn't.
And it's not just Emily that's being hurt, it's the contractor like me that goes out to lay out a septic system for instance, my dad gave me an acre and then I bought 5 more acres off of him. Well, they just did the administrative measured off stuff. Well,
Yeah.
last year I had to go move all 4 of my fences because the neighbor got a survey. They sold part of it off. One's 15
Yeah.
foot and 2 foot and 4 foot, and, you know, it's a major headache. Just had it surveyed to begin with.
And I just want people, this board takes a lot of time and effort when we read these documents, and we do the best we can. I believe that we do the best that we can. There are good people on this board. And we're not trying to make rules that are restrictive. We're trying to make rules that are helpful. This document, I believe, will be helpful. I believe that. And if we've said this at meetings, and now that there's public here to listen, I want you all to listen. If we pass a document, we can always amend it. They're always made to be amended. But if we don't have a starting point, we can't amend anything. So I just want us to take it seriously. I want the public to take it seriously. If you have questions, ask. If you don't like something, just have a conversation. It's okay to talk. But this could be very helpful in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And I just want people to know that. It's not to be mean or take away anybody's rights. It's to help you with what you're supposed to own, so you know where you own, because you're going to put a lot of money into that property, and you would hope that it's on what you own. And I see it in my office. Dan's a licensed surveyor, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but he sees it every day. It's not just in Washington County, but he sees it every day. And when people come in your office and they're so upset because they got a survey or their neighbor got a survey and they don't own what they always thought that they owned, it really is heartbreaking. So I just want us to really put in the effort on this, guys. If I could ask anything from you, I just want us to put in the effort. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very well put.
No, I think another important thing to mention that I forgot to touch on was, as of right now in Washington County, you can just have a legal description prepared and recorded without having a survey performed at all. And, you know, when a licensed surveyor comes out, they're required by law to set boundary corners, property corners, create the description, create the plat. As of right now, you can have an attorney write a description and record it. Well, all it takes is, they haven't been out in the field, all it takes is one blown bearing in distance, and that property's on the opposite side of the road. And then it gets transferred, and someone thinks they know exactly where their 2 acres are at Emily's Point. They build a house, and what they own and have title to is on the other side of the road. So I won't even say what they have title to, what they've been deeded is on the opposite side of the road. So I think this is really important. It's going to eliminate some of the nonsense with developers from out of this county coming into this county, which I know all of you have seen numerous times, and chopping a piece of property up as many times as they can in the quickest and cheapest way that they can, and then transferring those to landowners in Washington County that are going to build a house there. And then that problem gets kicked down the road 10, 15 years until it becomes an issue, and that developer is long gone. So I really, truly believe this is in the best interest of your residents and protecting their land rights moving forward. So.
Did I say something, Todd?
Yes?
I want to thank Emily for saying all that she did. Very well said, thank you.
Thanks.
I do not want to put you on the spot, but you know things and understand things that I don't because of your position and what you've dealt with. Are there things that some of those things you said you want to talk about later, is there something that you could, not necessarily page 5, letter E, all those things, but some general things that I should be keeping in my mind as I read?
Like for clarification, because I have read it so many times, like I've called Connor and I'm like, hey, I think we need to add some extra words in here because I read it the one time this way and then I put it down and 2 days later I picked it up. I think we need to put like extra words in here. Because when you read a list one way the first time, it looks one way. So like when you read it, put it down and then pick it up and read the same section again, because you might think a different way as well. And then when I called Connor, he was like, oh, well, maybe that is that way. We'll talk about it and see what everybody else thinks at the meeting. So I don't want you guys to take what I have to say as the gospel. And then I talked to Connor again in the first draft that got posted online, and the public saw it and we saw it. When we did like building zoning, like how far from the property line, there was a picture in there, and it kind of showed what it looked like. Well, when we talk about these subdivisions, and I talked to Connor if he could do it, and if we wanted him to, if we could kind of show a visual of like, we're saying you can like 4 or 5 splits and then a 10-acre, and when you say that out loud, can we see like an example of what that would look like, and with the driveway, and then if you have like your building requirements coming out of those, like what would that look like? And so, not that everybody's would have to look the same, but as an example, like can we see this on the administrative plat? Can we see like a drawing of an example of a minor or of a major? The minor and the major, that would be more for developer sides of things, or like, but like an administrative, that's what most people, citizens in Washington County, that's mostly what we see in my office. So when it gets higher than that, I don't have a lot of knowledge in that. It just hits me afterwards. And I talked to Connor about that. I also don't know Indiana code. I don't just read that for fun, I'll admit. So when Connor put this in here, here's when I say I've read it forwards and back, this is what mine looks like. I printed out the code on Indiana code, and I've read it because it references Indiana code, but I didn't know what it was. So I printed it out. I printed it out when he said the 700 series. I didn't know what that was, so I printed it out so I could read it while I was reading this document every single time. I printed out just extra things. There's a thing in here that talks about different attorneys. I'm like, is it that attorney or should it be our planning commission attorney? Where do we go there? Just questions like that.
Okay.
Things like we kind of did when we were going through the draft of the other one. Just what do I think makes the most sense when we look at it, kind of.
Yeah, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I
No,
don't
you're
think
good.
we were really changing anything in the
When
document.
we didn't, we said we
Danielle,
would bring it up at the
as much as we
meeting.
were, just some points of clarification,
Yeah.
and making sure that when someone's reading that, it's as clear as possible.
And then whenever it's time for everyone to look at it, I don't want to jump ahead of anyone. I want everyone to look at it. And we go through it. We can talk about it at the same time.
And I just want to clarify too, so this document that we have right here is just for us right now. We're going to talk about it, we're going to review it, talk about it, make changes, and then the changed, amended document would be what potentially could be put out for public comment.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't know that there's a real reason to put it out right now. If you guys have amendments to make, like, let's go ahead and get those knocked out, because I'm sure some of the concerns or amendments and questions that you guys have are the same ones the public's going to have. Let's hash those out over the next 30 days, bring it back here, have that discussion, and then set it for public hearing the following month, and then give that 30 days of it being posted on the website. Again, I think it would make sense for someone to have a copy of that and be the point person in this county, that anybody that has a question can come and ask and talk through. Obviously, you guys know that you can contact me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can with answers. So that's what I would recommend moving forward.
In public hearing, just as clarification for everyone, because we didn't make it past that point, that doesn't make it law. The public hearing is just moving it from our board to the next board.
Yeah, and that can be
That's-
continued as well. So
Yeah,
like
we
if we
could
bring
move
it
it
for
on.
public hearing and there's a
I
lot
know
of
we didn't get to
discussion,
that point, but that,
we just table it and then we make any amendments that the public brings up, and we bring it back to this board for a public hearing. And then whenever
There we go.
everything's shored up and you guys feel comfortable sending it to the commissioners is when we will do so. And that's if the commissioners adopt it. I believe it takes 2 hearings. Lisa, am I correct on that? That's when it'll be approved and finalized, if it gets to that point. So, yeah, that's what I would recommend moving forward.
Okay. I just didn't want there to be expectation that this document was going to be on our website and
Yeah.
people were looking for it, because I agree, I think after hearing Emily, everyone is going to want to be more actively involved, so.
totally appreciate it as well.
And I guess the only other thing that I have, and this may be something that when we were discussing the full document in the past, one thing that was brought to my attention, and I have some connection to this with my own family and even myself, you know, it was brought to my attention several times that, there may not be something in here about creating a home for a special needs child or an aging parent or thing like that. I believe that we all had considered that before and had thought about those things and have a lot of compassion, and we know we're all going to potentially be at that point sometime in our own lives. I just want to make sure we have something in here to kind of put that at ease as to there's something there that, whether that means, I just would like to see it, some words that share that we understand that we're not trying to keep people from taking care of their family, what that might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, we never had a public hearing to hear some of
Exactly.
those and explain it.
Exactly.
But I know that was discussed, and it's something that it was just missed. Obviously, it wasn't the intent to keep
No.
people from doing that. So not having a zoning ordinance to go along with subdivision control ordinance creates some challenges in that, because that's typically where that would be addressed. I know you guys currently have some zoning. It may be worth amending the current zoning ordinance or creating a ordinance. I don't know that outlining some of that in the subdivision control ordinance is appropriate, but you can also vary from the subdivision control ordinance just like you can a zoning ordinance. So, potentially having to go through the variance process, even though that's not ideal and that's not our intent, without that zoning ordinance to go along with it, that might just be best case scenario. Because we are going to address that in the zoning ordinance via hardship with some rules and regulations outlined, because that's not, again, the intent of the ordinance to keep people from caring for their loved ones.
Correct.
Kind of what the commissioners have did in the past, when somebody had a disabled parent or something, they would suspend the septic system rules and allow them to hook into the existing system, as long as it didn't create a problem, and everybody just had a piece of paper that said when he passed, it all got unhooked.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, there's
hopefully that would be helpful.
there's a few ways that you guys can address that, but I definitely think it's worth talking about and mentioning. Just have to figure out the best plan moving forward.
Probably the subdivision ordinance is not the place probably to put it.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, maybe an amendment to the current, I know the zoning standards currently aren't
Okay.
super involved, but I think adding something to those may not be a bad idea.
We can address it, yeah.
I just wanted it to be discussed in a public meeting that
Wasn't our intent.
was not an intent, something that was intended. It was
Yeah.
because of the nature of the way things happened,
Sure.
that we can't address it specifically here.
Okay.
Thank you.
And kind of on that same note, I'd love the board to take another look at this 2-acre minimum. That's, if you look at our draft that we just got back, we're going to lose 1,000 residents by 2050. So we need to do everything we can to as much growth and development, because we're going to lose our tax base, our taxes are going to increase. So it's just something I'd love for everybody to just take a little closer look at, because we did 3/4 of an acre for the last 50 years, and now all of a sudden you're going to tell everybody you got to have 2 acres. Well, that's hard for a lot of people to do, to maintain, to pay taxes, when you're first starting out or when you're retiring. So just something you might take a little closer look at.
Can that minimum acreage requirement be in the subdivision ordinance? Or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had that wrote down from the concerns that we heard throughout the public. I wrote that down in this one, that it was a concern to take it back down to a 1 acre instead of a 2 acre. If that's what we chose to do in our subdivision control ordinance.
I'd like to have just a short discussion on that, because that was a very hot topic. Apparently it affected more people than certainly what I thought. I wouldn't have thought 1 acre, 2 acre mattered, but
I think we should start by explaining, since we do have some ears here, how we got to the 2 acres. We didn't just sit here and we're like, 2 acres sounds good. There was discussion had about 2 acres.
several times. It was even, 5 was even mentioned.
I've
But
got some minutes here if you want me to read it. Basically, what was told that night was Lori brought up some concerns about elderly people. We discussed it a little bit, and then basically Todd said something about Urban Bay and said that 2 acres was easier to sell than any other acreage, and that's kind of what we based our vote on that night.
I believe I remember it a little differently. I also shared that, the idea that Washington County is a very agricultural county, and our comprehensive plan shared that
And they
we
came to our meeting.
wanted to maintain the agricultural nature of our county, that was one way we could do it, to maintain that, is by changing that minimum lot size. And so that was one thing that I took into consideration.
And that's where my consideration came from.
And I think I've even shared before that I have a friend in Iowa that their minimum, they allow one home per section of land, and it's a minimum of a 40-acre lot size for that one home. And that really tells me what they value in that county was agriculture. And so, in my opinion, I was thinking, obviously I would never make that recommendation, but I was thinking it as a Plain Commission member who is trying to preserve the agricultural nature of the county. That was one way I was willing to do it. Wasn't considering 5, but didn't necessarily think 1 was going to meet my expectation. So that was also considered.
My thought is, if you've got a minimum lot size, you don't have to get out into agricultural. There's a lot of little niches all over this county that people could be building on rather than being out in that.
Yeah, such as a subdivision. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that there was a comprehensive plan. The county took information, there were surveys done, people in the public took notice of this.
Hundreds and hundreds and
The
hundreds.
company, I forget their name now, came to one of our meetings to give us an update. One of the main concerns of our county was to keep it rural, which people didn't want to see houses everywhere. In order to not see houses everywhere, you can't have houses everywhere. So if we had bigger lot sizes, not even lot sizes, because in my office, a lot size is a subdivision, so a parcel size, if you have a smaller parcel size, you can put more homes. So if we made it a 2-acre minimum, I think Brown County was like 3 or 4 or 5 acres. We talked about that at one of our meetings. If we went to 2 acres, we could see how that would go, and if there was a bunch of, if we had backlash or if it wasn't working the way we thought it would, we could amend it and make it to 1 and see how that went. And then at the public hearing, we would see how the public took it, and if they didn't like 2 acres, we would then take into consideration, reconvene, we would re-meet, hey, the 2 acres didn't go over well, we can cut it back. That was my interpretation. And
My
I could be wrong.
apologies for using lot size
You're good.
instead of parcel.
You're good. Nope. No hard feelings, but I just wanted to explain how we started at 2. But that we all knew that 1 would kind of be a major consensus at the end.
We did have a lot of conversation on this, and every municipality is a little bit different. Like you said, Brown County has a greater requirement, and that's because of their terrain. It's just very difficult to get a flat acre, which is a little different here. The municipalities around Washington County, they're kind of all over the place, anywhere from 1 to 5. We've seen 1 be really successful. I don't know that you're going to see just 1-acre lots pop up all over the county if you guys trim it back to 1, I think. And then if it is, and it does become an issue, again, just like you said, we can come back and amend that. So, yeah, I think maybe being a little less restrictive and seeing how that goes and then addressing it down the road may not be a bad play. I completely understand everybody's concerns. I just don't know that it's going to get out of control by any means.
I'd like to make some comment, if I could please. My thoughts on that, I'll just tell you up front, I suggested the 5 acres. I got shot down. That's fine. Okay, you got to start somewhere. Okay? The 2 acres, and if you'll bear with me, I'll try to go through my rationale for the 2 acres. And part of this has to do with the BZA as well. But if we go 1 acre, and a young couple, people talk about starting out, families and all, may not have the money to do things, and I get it. I was there one time. Okay? But you go in, you build a house, you set a modular or some sort of housing, it's fine, whatever. You've got that, okay, you know, a lot size is 43,560 square feet, and that sounds like a lot. But when you lay it out, it's only about a 200-foot square, or 230 by 230. So you put a house on it. Well, a few years later, you know, families grow, kids, maybe a parent moves in or whatever, you need a bigger house. So you put something else on that property. Times get better, you have kids decide, well, we need a boat. But then we need a shed to put it in, or a building, I shouldn't use the word shed, but a building to put it in. 40 by 60. That's what, 2,400 square feet, isn't it? Yeah, 40 by 60, 2,400 square feet. So, oh, well, we got a septic system. Oh, well, don't forget the septic system. And that takes whatever the square footage are. You can tell me more about it than I can.
Like an average 3-bedroom system of a sand line system now takes a couple thousand square feet.
Okay.
So it's not near the half acre.
Well, I get that, yeah. Then okay, we've got a driveway in there as well. Well, then we decide we want a camper, whatever. You know, oh, we need a bigger building. I guess an acre probably would fit out there. But I guess I'm trying to think ahead for people, just a tick here, about, okay, if they've got an acre, but if they're crowding property lines, trying to put up their 40 by 60, because they don't have room on that acre, and their garden spot, and all that in there, next thing we know, they won't put up, if they want to do something, they've got to go before BZA to get approval, maybe to do that. Whereas if we start out with 2 acres right off the bat, we don't have to, the BZA won't be seeing these people because they want to put up a building because they don't have room anywhere else, and they've got to crowd the property line, they've got to crowd their neighbor and all that. So that was my thought process behind that. Makes perfectly good sense to Kevin here. But I've been told in public meetings before that I'm too simple-minded. It don't work that way. So, you know, that was my rationale for the 2 acres versus an acre. Because when you start cramming stuff in, 43,560 square feet, it fills up fast. And next thing you know, you're right up against the neighbor's property line, you know. And so that was my rationale for doing that, for going for the 2 acres. And I still like the 2 acres. But somebody maybe they can sway me. You know, I'll listen. I won't cuss or fuss or nothing like that. But that's my rationale for it. So, thank you.
Okay. You have any comments, Marcia?
No, sir.
What's the acre size in your subdivision?
2.
2?
But a number of people own more than 1 lot.
Okay.
So there's several people have almost 5 acres.
Okay, I'm going to try to communicate to everyone what I heard since February 28th. I have a good friend, high school friend, who has a son, and the son still lives at home, and he would like to stay in the neighborhood. Property's expensive. They don't own a lot of property. They would like to keep him close because they're a close family. They work together. But obviously they want him out of the house. This is a situation where the 2 acre minimum hurts them. In a perfect world, which we do not live in, I would think like Danielle. You know, I wish, you know, we had a 40 acre minimum. But I'm a country person, so to speak. I don't like big cities. I don't like towns. Don't like going to town. And then I would also kind of side with Kevin. We don't live in that world. The reality is that, you know, we have people out there, things are expensive. Ground is expensive. Goes up more and more every day. So I feel their pain. I understand why people get upset because we have proposed a 2-acre minimum when, quite frankly, a lot of young people just can't afford it. I don't necessarily agree with it 100%, but I really, I forget who said, I don't think we're going to get a rash of 1-acre lots. I think you said that, Connor. So I'm really not that concerned about it. I'm more concerned about the person, the young person that can't afford 2 acres, but they can't afford 1 acre. And I don't want to hinder them. And as it stands now, I'm kind of leaning toward the 1 acre. I know it works in other counties, and it's something that could, if it gets out of hand, we could change it later. Would you want to just briefly talk about what Brown County went through with changing their lot sizes, and they had a lot of the public who didn't like it, and what they ended up doing in the end?
Daniel may be able to hit on that better than I can. I wasn't super involved in the Brown County process. I just know the reason that they went with the larger acreage and the larger lot size or parcel size was due to a lot of the terrain issues they were battling.
Well, there's a lot of places in this county that have terrain issues.
Yeah.
We had a case a couple years ago. So, what do you want? What do you have any comments on that, Daniel? Yes.
Let's come.
Yeah, so the Brown County, to answer the Brown County issue, it had more to do with Danielle's point of the comprehensive plan than it did anything. They took a good look at what they for some reason in the last 5 years is getting a huge influx of Chicago residents. And you really don't know why. I don't know if it's being marketed to Chicago, but they're getting a lot of Chicago residents. And they saw their county being carved up just constantly. And it lost sight of what they wanted, their comprehensive plan, what they wanted Brown County to be. We know Brown County is a rural community that takes a lot of pride in their plan of what they want the county to be. Now, it was a terrain issue because, you know, as you said, when you go to put a septic system on, you know, the health department now, you've got to have it approved and secondary approved. And so if you don't have the soil quality or the soil type, or you have too much change in terrain, that's going to chew up that acre in a hurry. So it was both the terrain and the comprehensive plan. This ordinance falls into rural Washington County. This doesn't pertain to the 2-mile fringe. And I think the 2-mile fringe got lost even when we talked about the zoning ordinance. This isn't talking about somebody a mile out of town. This is rural Washington County regulations. So I think the comprehensive plan side of it is just as important as what size do you need to make the requirements for septic, home, outbuildings, and so forth.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Say something?
You sure can.
Okay. I wanted to go back to what David said, just to clarify. We talked about this a lot. And I was kind of, just for everybody to know, I was kind of on the fence too, believe it or not. I don't know why I've seemed to have been cornered in on certain things, but I've thought a lot about this. And when he was talking about, Urban Day talked about how it's easier to sell with it being 2 acres, it's not necessarily that it's easiest to sell.
Easiest to market.
It may be easier to market, but it's easier to live. It's easy, you know, and that goes back to what Kevin talked about. When you're young and you don't have a lot of money, You start with this, and then you grow, and then before you know it, sometimes what you need doesn't fit anymore. And I've worked in real estate for over 30 years, and I've seen that a lot. Just different examples, I have seen people want to sell their house because of that reason. They want to have a garage. They want, we live in agricultural Washington County. That's what I want to drive around and see all the time. I don't want Floyd County. I don't want Clark County. I want our crop ground. This is where I live. This is where I was born and raised, and that's what I want to see here. But when I see somebody sell a house and they're like, we don't understand, this house is selling for $250,000, but my house is only going to sell for $130,000, and the only thing they have that I don't is a garage. And it doesn't cost me $120,000 to put up that garage. It's very difficult to explain to them, you're now trying to sell a piece of property that doesn't fit for you anymore because you're now to that place and you've cut your market down to somebody that they have to understand that it's not going to fit for them either someday. So it cuts their market ability, and that's maybe where the market value comes in. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to clear up on that. I wanted people to know that I've started out on 1 acre. I know what it is. I started out on 1 acre because that's all I could afford. And then I bought another acre. And then it came to the point where I was able to buy an additional 6 acres. When I bought the 1 acre, we just stood in the middle of the road with a tape measure, and we measured up the road and said, there you go. And we set a house on it. Thank goodness it fit in there. We didn't know what we was doing. I was 19 years old. Then we go to the next one. Oh, well, this is where we decided the line was. We'll go up and we'll measure it. Daniel's heard this many times. When we decided to do the 6 acres, we were like, let's get a survey now. Turns out that part of what I owned was the cemetery. So what was in my legal description that I had been running for, 10 years before we bought the rest of that, I owned some of the cemetery. And the cemetery couldn't dispute it. Thank goodness no dead people were put in there in my area. And that's what I kept thinking. That would have been a mess. Yeah. But anyway, because of that survey, we were able to go in and get everything corrected. There's not ever going to be an issue again. We hear this stuff all the time in the county. So I have to agree with what Emily says. And I totally support what she says. We have got to come up with some rules. As far as the subdivision control, I'm in between the 1 and 2 acres. I agree. I don't know that we're just going to see all this influx of 1 acres everywhere, because I drive from county to county, and I believe Jackson County has 1 acre, correct? And I don't drive through Jackson County and see nothing but 1 acre parcels everywhere. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen here. And it's like we've talked about, it can be changed. If we see that it becomes an issue, it can be changed. The whole 2 acre thing, if you want to talk about values, I'm not an expert, but if you go down to, this is just something to throw out there. If you go in and say, you can put anything on 1 acre, what does it do to the market value on the 1 acres as opposed to 2 acres? I've thought that a lot. In rural Washington County, I don't know what it'll do. Will it increase that 1 acre? Does it then make 1 acre worth, kind of like when you do go to Floyd County, 1 acre can be worth $75,000, where 2 acres is only worth $80? It's like, I don't know. But right now, we don't have any rule on it at all other than, 3/4?
Well, there's actually no lot size minimum.
There's no lot size at all? The 3/4 comes in with the septic.
No, the 3/4 was the previous rule and ordinance that we had on septic.
On
So
septic,
the new ordinance, there's no.
No, but that's where the
septic.
3/4 came in, right? It had to
It's the
do,
septic, yes.
what had to do with the previous septic, yeah.
1 acre if you have a water well.
Yeah.
Private.
And believe me, I'm on a well, so I dealt with that too. I had to go through all of those rules and everything in 1987. That's how far back rules go. We have to have rules.
I'm a little older than that, but I went through the exact same thing.
Yeah, just a little bit, yeah.
Could we put kind of a question mark on it and
Yes.
wait till after the public hearing and see what the public
Yes,
My kind of
input
thought,
on that is?
Yeah.
I do agree with that.
my kind of thought on it was you have a very valid point, and Kevin's absolutely right about building on later and stuff. Of course, they knew that when they got into it, but what would you and I have done if back then we'd have had to have 2 acres? My dad wasn't gonna give me 2, like they killed him to give me 1, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't given anything. My parents didn't have nothing to give me. So everything I have, I got it myself.
Well, I just think it's important to understand that rather than someone have to go to the trouble of going through, coming before the BZA or getting a variance, if we keep the 2 acres, we could snuff that out, and if we did make it an acre, that would accommodate the people who can't necessarily afford 2 acres or more, and I think it would help people and maybe avoid having to get a variance. And I think we all know that obviously if someone was offered 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 acres, for about the same money as they could acquire 1 acre, that they would certainly choose more acreage. They're not trying to limit themselves to 1 acre because they want to. It's a have-to situation. So I agree with Andrew. We'll think about that, and that's something we need to make a decision on. And we've got a couple other agenda items. I'd like for everyone to think on this, and we'll wrap up the subdivision portion and move on to the confined feeding minimum acreage, unless anyone has something else they'd like to talk about.
I'd like to know if Daniel has anything else he wants to share.
Yeah.
Yes, you sure can.
I won't take too much more of your time on this. I think I came, a year, 2 years ago, time flies.
Yeah.
And maybe be one of the reasons that the ball got rolling on this. The first thing I want to clarify is why. Why do we need this? And not just to the board, but to everyone in the crowd. I want to talk to everyone here that this is to protect the public, not to hinder the public. Just like Emily said, with all the people that come in her office and the stories she hears and the sad stories, I hear these all the time. And I've heard some of the worst of the worst. I've sat at more kitchen tables and seen families cry over things that you just can't believe. I do a lot of work here in Washington County, and I see things here in Washington County that I just to tell you the truth, I don't regularly see anywhere else. You have a current subdivision control ordinance. The problem is there's not much about it that's black and white. It's about 90% gray. That's problem number one. Problem number two is you have a group of developers and some people that particularly like to do business in Washington County due to your lack of rules. You have people that are literally taking advantage of Washington County and profiting from it. And all that is doing is hurting the residents. Okay? So that's why it needs to be, that's the big reason why this needs to be done. I could get into stories of houses over lines, people who found out that the bank is repossessing their house because it was put on a mortgage on a property that they didn't know. I can tell you stories about a lady who thought she had 50 acres only to find out that her legal description was incorrect and she has 36. Just last week alone, I was in southern Washington County, and 3 siblings allowed all their nieces and nephews to put trailers on a piece of property, which is fine. 3 of the 4 trailers are built over the property lines. And now, instead of paying a little bit of money to do this right, originally, they're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in title work, deed work, survey work, attorney fees to get this all cleaned up. And I see this on a regular basis, and it doesn't have to be this way. I would much rather make a living just going out and surveying properties correctly and make sure we're establishing things the right way. And I do that. I do a lot of that here. But I also spend a lot of my time surveying in Washington County, trying to fix the problems and the messes that have been created due to the lack of the control that you've had in the previous subdivision control and the abuse that's been taking place. Just a few things that I heard and I wrote down is private roads. You guys have more private roads and private easements to access homes than any place I've ever seen. I think you could take all the adjoining counties combined. And I talk to people all the time that say, I don't know why Washington County won't maintain my road. Well, it's not a public road. You bought this place not understanding what you truly have. You don't live on a public road. This causes problems for the commissioners. It causes problems for the highway department. And now people are buying and selling real estate who don't truly understand what they bought. Danielle brought up a lot of good points. There are hardship variances. I've seen those in several counties where you can vary from the rules of how many residences are on a property due to a hardship variance. So I do know that that's possible. That's something I've seen. When it comes to the acreage, I know that there's a lot in this ordinance, and I know the acreage is going to be one of the biggest things that gets kicked around. And the thing I'll say about this, I don't have a dog in the fight when it comes to that. I really don't. I can only tell you what I've seen. I've been doing this, been in business for nearly 23 years. I think I've worked in just about every southern Indiana county. And I've seen every rule and regulation you can see in a subdivision control ordinance. I've read dozens of subdivision control ordinances. And I've seen the acreage all over the place. The one thing I will say about the acre is this. The acre is a minimum. And keep that in mind. So if I go out to survey somebody's place and we go and they say, we need an acre, and they call the health department and they say you have a primary and a secondary, but they have to be here. But in order to do a primary and a secondary and get your home in, we're going to need an acre and a quarter. Well, then that's what we do. That's what we survey. If it takes an acre and a half, then that's what it is. But keep in mind, it's a minimum requirement. Okay? So if you have to go beyond that to include your septic to get the 2 regulated areas, or you have to go beyond that to get a barn for your camper or whatever, you can do so, especially if you're buying property or splitting off from family. Keep in mind when you think of the acreage, think of it as a minimum instead of this is what we want to see. Currently it was at 3/4 of an acre, and I'm just going to tell you right now, that does not work. Every time we've tried to split out 3/4 of an acre to survey out for somebody, and then we go and they get their soil test done, and they figure out where their driveway and their house is going to be, I can tell you right now, that is just not even close. Urban Day was a great friend of mine. Urban and I talked about this subdivision control ordinance being updated for a decade or more. And I'm happy that we're finally sitting here and having this conversation. I'm happy for the residents of Washington County. I'm happy for people like Emily and myself that this is going to make things easier. I want to make sure that I make this clear, this is not to restrict or hinder people. As a matter of fact, this isn't perfect as written. But I will tell you this, out of all of the dozens of counties of subdivision control ordinances I've ever read, this is one of the very best I have ever read. For the reason of it is common sense, it is not restrictive, and it cleans up 98% of the problems or more that Emily and I see. This is very good. It's not perfect. It could use some edits. There's some things that needs to be gone over. As a surveyor, I don't want to see restrictive rules. When I go out to survey somebody's property, I don't want a 40-page manual I have to adhere to survey somebody's property any more than the people want. Okay, so I don't want these restrictions either, but there has to be common sense. And I will tell you that this does that. the bones of this is very, very good, okay? So, just as Connor said, if anybody has any questions, they are more than free to reach out to me at any time. I make myself available. If there's anybody in the crowd that would like to reach out to me, I try to make myself available as well. I want to make sure everybody understands this, just like Emily said. So anything I can do to help to spring this forward, I'll sure be here to help. And if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, whether that's now or after the meeting or anytime forward.
Thank you, Dan, for that, and thanks, Connor, and thank you both for always answering the calls and for all the help you guys have done for us. I really do appreciate it.
The last thing I want to say is, and this is going back to, what was experienced with the zoning ordinance, don't rush it. Take your time on it. Make sure you as a board are happy with it, okay? This is just my advice. Make sure the board is happy with it, you understand it, and then give the time for the public to give their feedback. Don't rush it. Let's get it right, because something like this doesn't change every year. An ordinance like this is something that goes into place and it lasts decades. So we need to make sure we get the public opinion. We need to make sure we take it slow, we do it right. But we're on a really, really good path here to help the public.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, Connor, I didn't mean to kick you out of your seat. Sorry.
Okay. We need to talk a little bit about minimum acreage requirements for confined feeding operation. This goes back to, once again, property splits. I think that Travis brought this to our attention back last summer, I believe. He said it was coming. Apparently, just to give an example, you have a person who built a poultry or hog operation on, say, 100 acres, and due to the turmoil that we had with Tyson, a lot of growers didn't get their contracts renewed for whatever reason, or maybe they get burnt out on raising these animals after 10 or 20 years, retirement, so on and so forth. They decide they want to sell off a parcel. And we're going to try to lean pretty heavily on Danielle and Kevin here. Well, everybody here. Shouldn't just pick them out. But we do have an issue coming down the road, and I don't know if we've seen it in any great numbers yet, but we do need to address it. And the simple fact of the matter is we need to make sure that the setbacks are maintained when people sell these parcels around these confined feeding operations. So there's kind of the nuts and bolts of the situation, and I'd just like to start with Danielle and listen to what she thinks about how we should address this and go right around the room.
So I just passed around our current confined feeding, or current ordinances related to confined feeding. That's what's being passed around. I'm gonna pull a Kevin and get emotional here. When I started in this job, the confined feeding ordinances were on the table. And it was a difficult time. Not as difficult as the last few months that we've experienced, but because there was a lot of controversy over these. And as someone who loves this county and loves agriculture, and I serve in an agricultural position, it was difficult for me to agree to regulate agriculture in Washington County and not regulate anything else. Basically anything else. And so when we were talking about the confined feeding ordinances and we passed these and went through all of that, the idea that we were going to put together a comprehensive zoning ordinance to address the other concerns in the county was in my mind and one reason why I was so supportive of these ordinances. And at this point in time, I'm not in a position where I believe, and I'm open to hearing what other people say, and I could vote differently than what I'm saying right now, that I don't know that we should restrict confined feeding operations any more than they already are. At this point in time, I feel like if we're going to make any amendments to that, that could be a part of a potential comprehensive zoning ordinance in the future. I understand this is an issue that we've talked about, and I know that we have talked about having different scoring rubrics for the actual operating barns for confined feeding versus those accessory structures such as dead compost facilities, those kinds of things, which are a very beneficial component of the entire operation. So at this point, I don't have a recommendation for a minimum lot size for that. I do agree with our setbacks that are already included in this ordinance. I think there are concerns about what you're talking about, Todd, is related to people selling off property. I don't know how, and maybe the surveyor can help me answer this question, but when those properties are surveyed, I'm guessing the setbacks aren't maintained, or they are maintained. I don't know how that works, but there needs to be a process for maintaining the setbacks, but creating any additional regulation or ordinances at this time is not something I'm in favor of.
Do you have anything, Andrew?
Not right now.
Emily?
I'm open here.
Yeah,
Expertise.
she's a veteran.
She is.
She's been in the trenches
Been here longer than all of you.
14 years, right?
Absolutely.
Kevin?
I do. To go along with what I think Travis was looking at here, these properties that have sold off, they're finding they're not meeting setback requirements from property lines, and all these were already existing buildings. And I could be wrong on some of this, but he would be better explaining it probably than me. But now with the changes of with what's going on in agriculture and confined feeding, these people, they're changing their operations a little bit, so they're having to come in and get, since they don't meet now, they're asking for variances to put in. And I've been a supporter of, even if they don't have the footages, they're wanting to put in animal compost building, mortality compost building, or manure storage, which is great, as good as you can get for water quality. You know, to do that, and they're asking to put that on these lots that are already too small. And then you've got the guy that's coming in, or the farmer that's coming in, man or woman, okay, either or, maybe both at times, come in, but, you know, and they're wanting to build a facility to do what they want to build, a facility and want to build it right. So they're saying, okay, we've got to have setbacks, we've got to have so much property to do this on, but yet the guy over here does not have adequate footages, adequate area to build those type structures. So I think there's a little bit there. I think he's running into, or going to run into, some of that issue. And he did bring it before us sometime last year. You guys remember dates better than I do. So, you know, I think we need, at some point, they're going to have to go before BZA and ask for a variance. BZA could, I think he sent me, I found them on my phone the other day. I was looking at the parcels, don't know who they belong to. And, Judge, working in soil conservation for 32 years, I know where a lot of these farms are, but I didn't recognize I did recognize one. But anyway, and so I think at some point, if people we're going to have to help, because apparently we're just going to have to help give some guidance to people so that if they sell the property with those on it, that they need to have adequate acreages, so if they want to put that mortality building up, or they want to put that egg washing station in for the product that they would have to have, if they come in now, BZA is going to have to say yes or no. Well, somewhere down the road, I think we're going to have to help do that. Not that I want to be more restrictive, but sometimes, even I need some guidance every now and then.
Well, that's what it says on Section 402. Section 400-402, it talks about the substitution and extension of nonconforming uses. And so at this point in time, that's what should be happening, is if we're changing those or those kinds of things. We should be following this procedure, and it is coming before the Board of Zoning Appeals. But I could be incorrect, and I need to go on the website and look, but don't we have a separate score sheet for the things, accessory structures like the
Yes.
manure handling and things like that? And
Yeah.
so that's where some of those concerns can be addressed right now, I think. I don't know. I wish Travis was here. I have a couple
I
questions.
think Daniel
Daniel.
had
So
a,
the biggest problem you have with the confined feeding operations is, for Travis's standpoint, is he can't measure these setbacks. And the reason why he can't measure the setbacks to find if they're too close to the line is because most of these confined feeding operations were established by somebody writing a legal description. We're working on one in Livonia right now that's 3 turkey barns, and there's setback issues. Well, when they created those barns and separated out that parcel, if they would have had the new subdivision control ordinance in place, then Travis would have been able to go out and verify the setbacks. The biggest thing isn't always the acreage on a confined feeding operation, it's how close it is to something. So the setbacks are the most crucial thing. Well, if Travis can't measure setbacks because he's got nothing to measure off of, because most of them were done by legal description, it just creates a mess. So that's the biggest thing to think of is, how are we even measuring setbacks? You know what I mean? What are you measuring from? Where do you know where that building is in relation to that property? Doesn't really matter if it's 5 acres, 10 acres, or 20 acres. It doesn't matter. If you don't know where it sets and you don't know if it meets the setbacks, and you can't measure from anything physical, then you just don't know.
You mean like a benchmark?
Hey, Dan. As a licensed surveyor, this is a question, not as the elected surveyor, as a licensed surveyor. I own a confined feeding operation, and I have 100 acres, but I'm just wanting to sell off my barns. I'm calling you. I'm going to do it the right way. I want my property surveyed. I want to know, because I want to keep as much of my property as possible, because most people do.
Right.
Okay. I don't know what I'm doing. Do you know ahead of time, or do you know that you need to look for I think it's a 200-foot setback. I don't know, but I think we're 200 feet off the property line. Does a licensed surveyor know that, or do you know that you need to go look for that, or something that or does the property owner need to know that?
Yeah. Usually the setbacks is governed by whether that be the plan commission or be the building commissioner or whatever. So we always let people know. We put the property in based on the size restrictions, but you have to adhere by the county setbacks, because every county's got different side and setbacks or front setbacks.
So
But
Yeah.
what you have is, though, then is it gives Travis the ability to now go out and pull from a surveyor's pen and say, okay, you have a 200-foot setback. Your survey marker is here. This building needs to be placed. And it gives Travis something that he can physically measure to. And it gives the landowner something that they can go, okay, I know I own to here, and I know I have to be 200 feet from there. instead of, well, I had a legal description prepared, I really don't know where that is, Travis can't really measure to anything, let's go ahead and build the barns, and let's just hope that we meet the restrictions. And really, honestly, that's what's happening now.
We need to require a survey.
Well, that would be fixing your subdivision control things.
I don't want to say I've been preaching it for a while, but I've been preaching it for a while.
Yeah, you have, haven't
I'm just saying.
you? Okay.
And I guess this is a concern that I have because we utilize this score sheet that says that we mark a box, they get, if depending on what kind of operation it is, I'm making these numbers up, so don't quote me on these, but, if I'm supposed to be 200 feet from a property line.
Yeah, let's just say that's what it is.
We're making
I don't
that
know.
up. 200 feet from a property line, but because I'm going to be 500 feet now from a property line, I might get more points because that's providing more opportunity for the neighbors to
Accessory
be.
building.
Yes, those
something.
kinds of things. So we give them more points, but at this point, I'm kind of concerned about our point system and our score sheet because we're not able to do these things based upon what you're telling me, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We probably need to consult with Travis a little more about this, but I think we all agree we need to do something pretty soon because this has been happening and, we ran into it really the last couple of years when there were grants available for manure storage, which we're all in favor of because it helps pollution and everything else. And we kind of had a rash of those, well, not a rash, 2 or 3 that we approved. And I believe maybe on one we had to have a variance because it was kind of tight as far as the space, but it's something coming, so we all need to kind of bone up on this.
Also with this, some of these buildings are changing in what they're doing.
Yes.
And how they're doing it, and it requires more.
Yeah.
And here we are with pictures of lines, supposedly survey lines or drawn lines, somebody's drew the lines, running right through the edge of the barn, and that don't work. It's just not even feasible, and common sense was used. Well, every time, no. I'm not going to comment any further than that on common sense. But when we're selling, if I sell Lori a piece of if I've got poultry houses, and I'm not picking on whether it's poultry or swine or whatever, dairy or whatever, I want to keep as much of that cropland as possible. So we sell right up pretty much to the building. Somewhere along the line, we need to educate people that it takes more than just the 5 acres for that to work on and work properly with. How do we do that? Because it's an education thing. Because a lot of times Travis don't know till those lines are drawn till he sees them. Yeah.
When they show up on the GIS, that's just a picture.
Right.
I mean, and that's all he has to go by.
Exactly.
We
I see what
surveyors joke that GIS stands for Get It Surveyed because it's
I wholeheartedly, I've sat here, Daniel, and thought, I bought it 9/10 of an acre, and the attorney did just the legal description, off of it. Now, it just so happened that there had been a survey done before, but I didn't necessarily understand all of that. But I told my family, I said, if you buy property or if you sell property, you better have it surveyed. That's me, but it costs money. Please don't take me wrong when I say this. It costs money when that young person wants to buy a piece of property. It costs money to do that. Well, I'm sorry, Lisa. You may write a legal description. It may be cheaper than having it surveyed. So that's the avenue we travel on.
The argument is always made, well, then that's going to be more expense up front.
Right.
If you would see some of the expenses that I see on a regular basis that people have to pay to fix these messes, Oh,
I don't doubt
These
it.
people would rather much go back in time and fix this and pay the money that it took to do it right the first time.
So all we're trying to do, we want to do, is one thing here, is for us to do it right. Do it right for our people that live in our counties. But that's what I feel like this board wants to do. And I think that's what we ought to do. I know that's vague about how we're going to do it or whatever, but that's enough. Kevin.
Can I ask one preliminary question? When the use of the building changes and it falls under 402, is there different setbacks for different types of uses?
Yes.
Whether
So-
it be dairy, whether it be swine? See, I'm not familiar with all the different setbacks.
Yep, so on page 6, we talk about, so we defined,
Okay.
Feeding operations. We broke them down when we made this ordinance into what we call animal feeding operations. And so there's a list of what defines an animal feeding operation: 250 mature cows, 18,000 turkeys, those kinds of things. Those are typically not regulated by IDEM at that level. And we were getting several barns or operations established in Washington County that met that 10,000 laying hens, 10,000 ducks, whatever it was. And so this was the Plain Commission's way of trying to provide some regulation, setbacks, things like that for those that were kind of flying under the radar.
Under the radar.
Okay? So then we have confined feeding operations, and those meet the standards based upon rules. And so they'll have a list, the state has a list of, okay, to be considered a confined feeding operation, maybe, and I'm making these numbers up, maybe it's 25,000 turkeys. So if they're between 18,001 and 25,000 turkeys, then they're going to fall underneath a confined feeding, and they're going to follow a set of standards in this book, or in this paper. And then we have confined animal feeding operations, which meet some state and federal levels. And so maybe that, I'm making these numbers up again, is 100,000 turkeys. So anything between what a CFO and that 100,000 turkeys might be. And all of those numbers are made up. I don't know what those are, so please don't hold me to any of that.
But the
And then
state
they have
regulations are different too.
I'm sorry?
So even if it falls up under a confined feeding operation, there are rules and setbacks for turkeys, dairy.
No.
So if the use of the building changes,
So in my opinion, so if it's an animal feeding operation, let's say I had a barn that had 10,000 laying hens, but then I decide to change that barn and now I'm going to put in ducks. As long as I have 10,000, if you look here, if I have 10,000 ducks, the rules, the setbacks, things like that are going to be the same. Now, if I have this 10,000 laying hens and I decide I want to take that barn and I want to make it 500 mature dairy cows, then that's where the setbacks and things would change because then now I've got a lot of it has to do with animal units and things like manure output and things like that. So that's where that would change. So
Some of these buildings that we're talking about here today have been in maybe turkeys, and they went to layers. So they need different situations, and the numbers will change in that, which will also throw it into a different category.
right. So
Even though it may be a poultry, it's going to change it in that there. Well, then, the extra things that we're going to add to those, like an egg washing house, well, then you've got gray water. What are you going to do with all that? And this is what they're going to be coming in for variance with, and they really don't have, we don't know for sure where the lines are at. But we'll get it figured out one of these days, Daniel, hopefully. But, yeah, so I think that's the use change that I think Travis is kind of thinking about.
It's challenging.
In that. So it is challenging, and we want to do what's best for everybody. We want to do what's best for the environment. That's why I said before, you know, I've always been a proponent, even if they don't have the setback, but they want to put in a manure storage facility, I'm one to say, go for it, because it's better than having it piled out on the ground with nothing. So,
Would someone explain to me why we can't maintain the same setback distance in feet, whether they split their property off or not?
We don't know where the 200 feet is because they don't have to have it surveyed.
Well, I was assuming we had that ready to
I didn't want to be mean.
get that wrapped up. Let's assume that's going to happen.
Well, I made a note on here, and this isn't to solve any problems, but Lisa came in today and we kind of talked a little bit, and then Travis did tell us that this is kind of a thing, and I do agree with Danielle. Like, I don't think we need to always put it on. But if you're going to split your property, we're saying you have to have it surveyed with the subdivision control ordinance, if it gets passed. That's what we're saying. So maybe there's not a lot we can do with the parcels that we have now. We're just going to have to variance it out. That might be a new saying that we have to have, I don't know. But what if we add to their permit sheet, if you're going to build barns on a property, which is a lot of money, then you should survey your property, and you should survey out 200 feet from where you think your barns are going to be, and mark that. So if in the future you want to sell off just your barns, at least you know where that inset's going to be. Is that possible?
I don't know of a single county personally that does confined feeding operation splits or barns splits that doesn't require a survey. To my knowledge, and we can maybe look it up, but to my knowledge of all the counties I work in, Washington County is the only one I know.
So like if we move forward, and if a subdivision control ordinance says you have to have a survey to split your property, and we have an acreage minimum, but for confined feeding, that's not making it more restrictive. Well, I mean, it is, but it would almost be like a level playing field. If you're going to split your property and you want to build a house, you need to have a survey, but if you're going to split your property and you want to do confined feeding and you're putting a structure on there, maybe.
But it would fall under the same ordinance.
But then like mark, because what happened, like they sell close to the barn, like close to the barns. Maybe like again, it's on the GIS, so me and you know, but maybe you could walk around them.
Most counties, before you get the permit to build your barns, you have to be able to prove to the jurisdiction of that county that you're putting those barns in a location that meets those setbacks.
With a
You
survey.
can have setbacks all you want, but if you don't know where they're at or where you're measuring from, then they're useless.
Or maybe they're like on a parcel that is from the barn 200 foot to the property. I don't know. I don't know.
What she's asking. She's asking if somebody's subdividing around
Existing barns.
Existing barns.
Existing barns,
Yeah.
because that's what's happening.
And I would
They're
say
already there.
Yeah.
There's two things.
Yeah.
You asked him earlier, and I don't think he called you, but you would typically know that's a confined feeding operation.
Oh, yes.
And you would know that if we had a rule on it.
Yeah.
I knew that you misunderstood. We were on the same page. I knew that you didn't understand my question, but I knew that
Yeah, and if you approve the subdivision control ordinance, all of these plats are coming before, again, you were tracked. So, I mean, you'll see the plat, you'll know that that's a confined feeding operation, and you'll make sure that those,
and if it's a
hopefully Dan will catch that anyway, but
Yeah.
so if it's a confined feeding, because I don't want to say I've never saw a confined feeding survey, because that would be absurd to say. But if there are barns on it, and not just you as a surveyor, but I'm going to say you because you're sitting here in front of me, would you do those dotted lines? Like this is the barn, and then, you know, like the fence markers and stuff like normal?
Yes.
Is that what normal surveyors would do?
Talking about an existing.
Yeah, they're existing, and then, like, I own them now, but I'm gonna sell them to Danielle, but I wanna keep my farm ground and just sell her my barns.
Yes. So, yeah, so it's existing.
And if it's in our ordinance now, which is not in the subdivision control, it's in our confined feeding, that it needs a 200-foot setback, and I hired a surveyor, would you have to look at this to know it's a 200-foot setback, or would the property owner have to be like, hey, we got an ordinance on that, and I have to be 200 feet from the line?
But
Yeah. That's tough when it comes to setbacks.
Yeah,
Because it's.
because that's where we're hitting now.
Yeah, it's all about where is that setback, where is that? Where is that disclosed from a surveyor standpoint?
Yeah,
If we're doing a site plan for a new building, then we'd have to disclose it.
yeah.
If you're doing a site plan for a new building, more than likely the lender's gonna say, you need a survey. If you're gonna,
Exactly.
so,
but if,
or I would if I.
Yeah, I was just throwing out questions, not trying to put anyone on the spot, just because we don't know. So I'm just trying to
This is
get
just
some
discussion.
information.
It's just discussion.
Yeah, not trying to put anybody on the spot or make anyone look like the bad guy, it's just,
We're having some situations where some are slipping through, where initially, when it's permitted, the setbacks, they meet the setback requirements, but then they're splitting them off where there's no setback or very little setback, going from a 200-foot to the property line down to maybe 10-foot or less.
maybe 10.
So what we're afraid of is that we're gonna have situations where that setback is eliminated and people may come and build close to these confined feeding structures, and maybe when they buy or they build, they're not being operated, but maybe they start operating later. And then we've got a coming to the nuisance situation, and who's at fault? I'm concerned that the county may share some of the liability in that. So we are talking about ways that we can prevent that from happening.
Well, you could always require setbacks to be put on your split surveys. I mean, that's something you could look at.
And we've talked about restrictive covenants that require them to stay in place and not be split off from that property with those buildings. But now that the surveyor's office is using GIS and not the paper maps anymore, we talked this morning about ways for Emily and her staff to catch that. But that could create a real problem down the road. But it's happening now.
Yeah.
Well, let's, if you would, if the rest of the board is okay with this, could you kind of look into that a little bit, what you just said, maybe a rough draft, some wordage on how to incorporate that into a property split where it is recorded on the deed? That makes sense, because we have got to catch that before somebody does harm to theirself or their neighbor and they don't even realize it.
I mean, is it something that we can add to our subdivision control ordinance that says that every confined feeding operation division that
Please
occurs
see.
has to go to the plat committee for a review to make sure that all those setbacks are, is that legal? I don't know.
You can add any restriction to the plat committee.
So that way, there's a group of people who's reviewing that and making sure that
I think,
this is,
I'm just going to speak from like courthouse. I don't want to speak from the surveyor standpoint because I'm not a licensed surveyor, so I don't do what Dan does. But from inside the courthouse, when stuff gets added to deeds, and Dan might see it from in his courthouse too, it gets dropped off. It doesn't always get retyped up on the next one. So when it gets added to a deed, unless it's a document by itself, and even then, it can get missed in a title search, not falling on anyone. It's just an accident, like a title search might miss it, or a property owner, it just might not get added on.
When someone drops off a deed that was just a legal description prepared and it was for a confined feeding operation, how do you know that, Emily, until you go to put it on the GIS? You have no way of knowing what that legal description is when it hits your desk.
We don't. Really, in the surveyor's office, what you're doing with your property and what's on it is no use to me. As long as we read your legal description, it closes, it's in this parcel, send it to the next office. That's the surveyor's office job in Washington County. We don't look at how many houses you have. We don't look if you've got a new swimming pool or not. We don't look for barns. I mean, and if that's something that we need to start doing, but that's not the surveyor's office's forte. And used to, up until just like this year, it was white maps, like white drawings with black lines on them. Dan used to see them all the time, 1 mile squares. So until it got back to be put on the computer, we didn't even know anything, because that's how the office ran. And we weren't the only office in the state that ran that way, but we're updating. Every office does so. We're hitting an updating period, and we're using the GIS, so you can see the aerial photo.
Progress.
Thank you. So, it's new. Mistakes will still be made, but human error, and we're working on it, but it's just, you know.
And this goes back to some of the concerns, right back to where we were talking about a young couple goes and puts a manufactured home on 1 acre beside some barns that hasn't been used for 10 years, and I can name one of them, and then it turns around. I mean, what's the future use going to be if there's nothing that says it can't be reused for something else? Now these people are living next to a nuisance that now affects their property value, and
I need to look in here, but I think that there's something that says if it sits vacant for so long, then it does have to become conforming to restart as a new thing. So if it's been set in 10 years, we're using that magic number, 10 years, and it was a broiler operation, and it was conforming at the time, if it was non-conforming at the time, if it's set empty, it has to become conforming moving forward. So they would have to meet the setbacks to be able to do
so
that.
that's some protection.
Yes, there's some protection. I need to look in here at what section and all that, but there's some language about that. I'm looking at Connor because he's read it and he should give his head.
Okay.
Okay, it's getting past the witching hour here. We do have one other item on the agenda, and we do need to just touch on it briefly if we just take 5 or 10 minutes. There was a 2-year moratorium on solar, commercial solar passed today by the commissioners, and some gentlemen here who are representing a company in town. We're going to give you, since you stuck around so long, at least give you the courtesy of, we'll give you 5 minutes and tell us what your plans are and how well you're willing to work with us here in Washington County. So come on forward.
Yes, I'm Colin Snow. We're with the company Ranger Power. We introduced ourselves a little earlier, but not everyone was there. So just quickly, we are a Chicago-based renewable developer. We have been working in the Midwest since 2016. In Indiana since 2017. We have projects in construction and built in Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Missouri. I think that's it for now. But we started exploring west, a little south and west of the 2 mile ETJ, or extra area outside of Salem. And so when we heard that there was interest in a 2-year moratorium to do an ordinance, we wanted to come introduce ourselves, offer ourselves as a resource for this. We've worked with counties all over the Midwest on ordinances, including most of the counties that are projects living in Indiana. Just, as I said this morning, I think, I understand that this is new to the county, and, there's a lot to kind of learn, work out, and hash out. But, I think this is something we can accomplish in much less than 2 years. We have sort of a limited time based on our interconnection to the grid to kind of get these projects moving and schedules, and they cost a lot the longer they take. So, we'd be very interested in trying to, help Washington County find an ordinance that worked for it, for solar, for a commercial solar energy system, as soon as possible. So, I'll pause there. Typically, I know people have a lot of questions about these projects and about who we are and what we do. I'm happy to get into any questions you might have right off the bat, though.
I think, last week, Colin had asked, or, I'm sorry, you're Colin, you're Owen.
Yes.
Owen I've met a couple of times. He's been hanging around here, stops in every, 6 months or so for the past couple of years. Yeah, met him before. And then I spoke with you on the phone, Colin, there, and I think I'd ask you if you say you had a what you might call a perfect county ordinance in one of the Indiana counties, or doesn't have to necessarily be an Indiana county, that you felt like was fair to both sides, because that's the goal here, to be fair and even-handed. Some people are adamantly opposed to solar farms. We have a lot of what I call legacy farmers in this county who have signed leases. We don't want to upset them, so we're kind of straddling a line and trying to keep everybody happy, which is probably impossible to do, but we're going to try. And you will be a part of that. So if you can get us any information in regards to ordinances in the state that you have seen that seem to be agreeable to you and everybody else, we'd be happy to look at them.
Be great. Yeah, absolutely. that hosts them. So, there's individual concerns. There's always, different things in different counties and different areas that people care about. I think Owen might have emailed some over to the commissioner's email.
Okay.
One of those includes, our ordinance that was created in Fountain County where they were not interested in vegetative buffers, but had a, pretty, they had quite a large setback from non-participating residences, a lesser setback for, properties that didn't have a residence on it, that kind of thing. As I said, we sent some over, happy to share kind of details on some of that. But in general, we're looking for the county to kind of let us know sort of the envelope, the boundaries, where we can build. Frankly, it's the less restrictions, the less expensive our project is typically, and the more individual concessions we do. It's our practice to go to every neighbor to the project, and if somebody is not happy, if a county has a 150-foot setback from non-participating residences, and they are not, that they feel that is too short, we will work with them, and if we're able to get that close, and most of the other project we have enough room for the panels, then we have wiggle room to move another 100-foot back.
Okay.
We can I think what is most typical of all ordinances, the things that seem to jump out and that people care most about are, setbacks, fencing, vegetative screening and vegetative cover. I would say, there's often kind of requirements about height and, the height of the panels, I guess, would be one. Road use agreements are fairly typical, maybe not as part of an ordinance might require a road use agreement to be entered into later with the, commissioners and, the highway superintendent, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Drainage agreement, drainage requirements are, sometimes required. And then typically one of the biggest items is the decommissioning plan and bond required. In Indiana, it's fairly standard for that to be required at, in advance of construction.
Sure.
At or in advance. So these are things we're fairly, familiar with, comfortable with, and, can kind of share different ways of doing them. And then, and I think we did share some counties where I believe they were, we shared Fountain, Warwick, Miami. These are just ones we're more familiar with.
Okay.
So, please. Sorry.
Please, right?
Yeah.
Typically, how big is solar farm for you? Commercial solar farm?
Yeah. So, we're still exploring it. We still are in very, very early days. And so we don't have an exact, amount. We're still in discussions with some landowners, that kind of thing. But we're looking at about 2,000 acres. And that's of parcels owned by landowners interested in participating. The reason I put it that way is that the actual size of the project would be much smaller than that. What we're studying at the Q is a 200 megawatt project, which means that's the most we can build in that project. And so, our rule of thumb is, typically 10 acres a megawatt should be able to handle that, So that's why the 2,000 acres. Now the actual footprint of the project for a 200 megawatt project is likely going to be much smaller than that. The parcel, that acreage includes, where the setbacks would be, an easement for a power line, wetlands that we'd have to set back from, that kind of thing.
So in other words, you may tie up 5,000 acres. I'm just using numbers here. I don't know what you've tied up. But you may only put a 2,000 acre solar field within that 5,000 acres. Is that what you're telling me?
It was a different project than ours, maybe, but ours is, because ours is limited at 200 acres, we tie up, we're trying to tie up as close to the amount of acres as we think we're going to need. So if we tie up more, we're just paying for stuff we're not going to get revenue from.
Right, but you don't know for sure where that's going to fit in drainage-wise.
Right.
And that type of thing.
Yep.
Whether it's karst topography. I go back to Irvington, Kentucky. If you've never been to Irvington, Kentucky, go look at it. Okay? That doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth as a farmer, as a landowner. So, but anyway, I'm open. I'll be open-minded. But that one there turned my stomach. Okay. I don't know who owns it.
It's not us.
Not you, right? Okay, but I'm just being up front.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to ask about is battery storage. Is that part of this plan as well?
No. Battery, no, that's typically kind of a separate development process. And in Indiana, there would need to be an ordinance for batteries as well. That's not really what we came here to talk about. We're just focused on our solar project.
Well, I didn't, yeah. Sometimes they go almost like they go hand in hand.
They can, yeah.
So I'm just, you're talking, so.
No, it's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. No, this is a solar project that, we would develop. Eventually we'd get a contract to sell the power, and the power buyer would buy it when the sun's out, and not when the sun's not,
I have a question.
It may not be the night for me.
Okay.
So you heard about our surveys. You sat through our meeting.
Very, very interesting.
So, welcome to Washington County. I'm glad to have you.
Thank you.
Since you got the intro, I think you know where my question's going.
Yeah.
A lot of our parcels aren't surveyed, so I'm the surveyor's office here in the county. Are you requiring these people that sign in to have their property surveyed so you know you're putting panels on properties that are signing in and not on the neighbor that didn't sign in? 'Cause if you don't, you should definitely.
No, it's a great question. I can answer definitively that we spend a huge amount of time and money on this question. We go through these we pull title on every parcel that's involved in the project. We hire a firm to do a Alta survey. We fly the area and do 1-foot topo and basically create an Alta that shows us what is actually out there. And this is not the only county that we've run into situations where, the GIS might show one thing, but it's not what's actually out there. And so then what we have to do to build our projects, we have to, as part of getting title insurance, we have to actually cure all the issues. So if there is some mistake in a deed or something got missed, or one of the big things that we run into are gaps between two deeds, where it's not clear actually who owns, So these
Or
are
an overlay. Somebody might both own it.
that's that.
Not that happens here, but if it does.
I'm sure it happens very rarely here, but that would be something we would have to cure in order to use that area. We would not be able to get title insurance or build our project over something like that. And so typically our practice is Owen and I, we have to find out ways to cure that. It can be very expensive and very difficult. But these are issues that come up, and it's why we lease more land than ends up getting used, because it takes a long time to figure even out what's there, and these are great examples of things that can come up, and a lot of these issues we can solve. There are some that we can't solve, so we can't build. But yeah, it's a great question.
If you haven't thought about it, you should definitely add it to your list.
It's already.
Throwing that out there.
It's on the list. It's on the list for sure.
Anybody else have any questions for the?
Sorry, I'll add one last thing too.
Oh.
We're very comfortable once we do like an Alta survey and do all that work. We're very comfortable sharing that with the counties we work in, and sometimes that can be helpful.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, Todd, but I have a comment. It's probably not going to be a very popular comment, but I think it'll help people understand where I'm coming from, and I'm glad that Daniel mentioned it earlier. I worry about people coming into the county and taking advantage of us because we don't have zoning ordinances. And so I think that's where I'm coming from on a lot of this. I'm 100% behind property rights and being good neighbors and all of that stuff. But I want people to know that when we talk about these things, that's something I'm concerned about because we know that it has happened. And so if I seem like a jerk or I make comments that people maybe don't like, that is one of the things that I'm constantly thinking about. And I'm not saying that you guys, that's
And
just a
I
general
appreciate
statement.
I'm on the same side as Danielle.
I would
Not
say,
that I just, a lot of people are very passionate about our county, and so we just need to remember that.
I applaud that, and, I applaud, wanting to create an ordinance that works for the county. Not all development is, done responsibly, and an ordinance that establishes minimum requirements can really help make that happen. So,
What do you think the life expectancy of your project is?
these projects are built